And welcome to you, Minister, today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, happy to be here.
Good. And I will take this opportunity to, again, like the power of technology, to introduce our two ambassadors who are going to be fielding questions to you. Okay. So I will introduce Aria and also Charles and pass over to you for your questions.
Aria. Hello, Aria. Hello, Charles.
Hiya.
Hi, I'm Charles. I have been doing these kind of things, these care advocacy things since I was 13, and now I'm in higher education. And I'm very happy to have been invited along to this one.
So hi, I'm Aria. I work for Devon County Council, my local authority. I'm care experienced. I'm also a Coram Voice ambassador for Devon. So brilliant. Sean?
Okay. Thank you. Is it this line? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for agreeing to come to meet with us today. We're going to get started with some questions from a national voice.
So what is your favourite childhood memory?
That is a good question. What is my favourite childhood memory? So I can't think of a specific one overall, but some of them are. We used to go on holiday every year to Blackpool, and we used to go when the lights were. So if any of you know Blackpool, they used to have a very, very long thing along the front where they have all sorts of different light displays. So they light up the tower and then they light all the way along the front. And so we would go to Blackpool pretty much every year on holiday when they started that. And as a child, that was always really exciting. So it'd be something like that or something to do with football. But I haven't got a specific one in my head at the minute.
Brilliant. Could you explain to us what the Children's Minister is?
Yes. So, in almost every area of life that you can think of, there will be a minister who is responsible for that thing. So there's a minister responsible for the police. There's a minister responsible for farms. There's so on and so on. Pretty much everything you can think of, there'll be a minister responsible. And so I am the minister for children, families, and well-being, which means everything to do with firstly children who are aged up to 5 years old, so what is called the early years, everything to do with the first 5 years, those are my responsibility. All vulnerable children are my responsibility, whatever their age. So although I'm 0 to 5 for a big part of my job, if you are in care, a care leaver, care experienced, adopted, fostered, if you are a child with special educational needs or a young person with special educational needs, if you're not in school and you're in alternative provision, any child who is in some way vulnerable, if you've come to this country without your family, then I am also responsible for you. And then I have the other parts of my jobs are about mental health, so that's the well-being part, and then families more generally, which is a lot of what I've already said, but also things like what government does with parents and how it encourages parents to do different things.
Brilliant, thank you.
So why do you think you'll be good at this role?
Well, you don't get any choice in what role you do. So the Prime Minister just decides, I'm going to put David here, I'm going to put Laura there, I'm going to put Claire there. But the reason that I think the people I work with think I'm probably a pretty good person to put here is that before I became an MP, which was in 2019, I had spent my life running charities for children and young people. So I had never done anything in politics before I became an MP at the end of 2019. I ran between when I finished university and when I became an MP, I ran 3 different organizations that help disadvantaged children to have better educations, better jobs, things like that. So that's why people think I'm a good fit for this role.
Yeah.
Why do you think it is important to support children in care and care leavers?
basically because I think there aren't many people who face bigger challenges in their lives. So there's lots of things that people take for granted when they're growing up, about where they live, about what money they have, about the sort of family situation they have, school, and so on. And I think care leavers can't take any of that for granted, and they face these incredible challenges. If you're in care, you face these incredible challenges when you should just be, hoping to focus on, school and playing with friends and so on. So I think they're just a very, very inspiring group of people that we should do all we can to try and help.
Brilliant. And how do you plan to make the experience of care better for young people?
So what we're trying to do, and this is government as a whole now. So I'm obviously responsible for the children and young people side, and that means trying to make sure that people who are care experienced are getting the education that they should be, that they're getting opportunities to do internships or apprenticeships that they should be, go to university, have employers that help them. A lot of that is things that are in the Department for Education, which is where the Minister for Children sits. But we also want to do things about helping with housing for care leavers, helping with travel, helping with benefits, and all those sorts of things. And so those are the things where other government departments are responsible for things, and then we work together to try and make sure that the corporate parents and so on are giving all the services and getting all the support that they need.
Yeah.
So a National Voice, we've got our current campaign that we're sort of working on, which is around setting up with the home allowance, which is the leaving care grant. It was recently increased from £2,000 to £3,000. But we've noticed not all local authorities are listening to this recommendation. They're not increasing the grant to the full £3,000. How can you make sure this is happening?
Well, it should actually be a minimum of 3,000. This is a we did increase it, and I was very pleased to see that sort of increase. But it is a minimum. So if local authorities wanted to go more, then they could do so. But they certainly shouldn't be paying less now that we've done that. So if you know of local authorities where that's true, and maybe Coram understands that for the country, then please do let us know, because we want to know what we want to know if that sort of thing is happening. I mean, if people should tell their corporate parenting boards, but I would also like to know which local authorities that is happening with.
Yeah, I don't think it's very well known that it's a minimum of 3,000. I think it's up to is what we are
Right.
aware of, but
Right.
something
But
that we can definitely look into.
Yeah, I think one way or the other, the main point is that if they're still doing 2,000, given we've increased it to 3,000, then yes, please do let me know where that's happening.
Brilliant, thank you. How are you going to work with other departments for the benefit of children in care and care leavers, like, for example, travel departments and housing? So how are you going to do that?
Yeah, so we've got a colleague of mine called Johnny Mercer who works in another department, and he's a military veteran. And a lot of what he has done in government is try and get better support for veterans. And when we talked to him about people who were in care, he got really excited about it because he felt like there were lots of similarities between services that were not good enough for people who'd come out of the military, and services not being good enough for people who'd come out of care. So we then appointed him as a kind of care leaver champion, and because he's in a department called the Cabinet Office, that kind of sits between all the other government departments, and so we're using him to push the Department for Transport or the Department for Work and Pensions and so on to do the things that we want them to.
Brilliant.
As you're probably aware, mental health waiting lists are huge. Care experienced children and young people often have complex trauma. They need support urgently. What are you thinking about putting in place to reduce the time they have to wait for mental health support?
Yes, so we're doing a bunch of things here. So we have a separate document, which is called, you might be familiar with actually, called Promoting the Health and Wellbeing of Children Looked After, which we've been updating, and that covers people up to the age of 25. And we've tried to give local authorities good examples of where mental health is being supported well. Because the thing about everything in government is there's always some parts of the country where something's being done really well and other parts where it needs to be done better. And so what you're trying to do all the time is get the best examples to be done by other places. And so when we published our strategy, Stable Homes Built on Love, one of the things we said we wanted to do was reduce the gap, both for physical and mental health, actually, when it comes to people who've been in care. And then we're doing lots of things in schools to try and support this. So giving every school a grant to train a school mental health lead, and then creating new mental health support teams with the Department for Health. But you're absolutely right. You know, it's a very important issue. And we need to improve those waiting times.
Yeah. So the government always tells us how important it is to exercise. However, going to the gym costs me £7 each time, which is very expensive over time. Some local authorities provide children in care and care leavers with free leisure passes. Can you make this a national requirement so that all local authorities can offer this?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, and we know that some local authorities are doing that. The problem always is, just talking about government more generally now, if you say to local authorities, you've got responsibility for things, you then don't want to say to them, but you must do this exactly the way that we want it to be done. So that's always a tricky balance for different areas. And some areas will feel that they can more easily afford to give those free leisure passes than some other areas for all sorts of reasons. But one of the things we are doing is, you guys have probably heard of the care leaver covenant that employers sign up to, and through that we're getting businesses to do all sorts of things. So Pure Gym, for example, are hopefully going to join soon and give a discount for being able to go to the gym if you're a care leaver. So there's great stuff like that happening too. But yes, of course, we'd like more people to do leisure passes if they can. It's just that some might say they don't have enough money to be able to do it at the minute.
Brilliant.
Hang on, let me find where I'm on the page. Thank you. We know that local authorities provide care experienced children and young people with lots of different things, such as bus passes and driving lessons. I think the buses have been down below £2 for last year. I think that's been greatly useful as a lead user. So we think this is great, but things like buying car insurance, car fuels is getting quite expensive. How can we make it fairer than based on individual needs?
Yeah, look, again, it'd be a bit like my answer to the last one. So there are some areas that do this, and in the northeast they've been doing free bus passes, and similarly in Cornwall they've been doing that as well. It's quite difficult with things like fuel and so on, because as you guys know, it's been very expensive at the minute. Although we have we obviously had that scheme to pay half of people's energy bills, everybody's energy bills, which care experienced people will have benefited from if they have their own place too. So look, it would be better if things were cheaper, Insurance is a particularly difficult, if they're talking about car insurance in that question, that's a particularly difficult one, because all the car insurers would say yes, but young people are more reckless and have more accidents, and that's why it's more expensive. And there is data to show that. So that would be a harder thing to make cheaper. Although you can do this black box insurance, which depends how good a driver you think you are, but so I didn't pick this, but you can do a black box insurance where it will record the data of how you're driving, and that does reduce your the amount that you have to pay. But obviously it does mean a lot of the data about how often you speed and everything else is recorded by the insurer, which people may not want.
So that's all of our questions from us. So thank you very much for answering all of them. But yeah, so we're going to hand over some questions to the room full of people, so they can ask you a couple of questions.
Great.
So thank you very much.
Not at all. Nice to meet you both.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you very much,
you.
Minister. So questions from the floor. I thought you had your hand up first.
NW, one of the biggest issues that we're facing is social workers keep leaving. This means that the child has to then rebuild all that confidence and trust with their new social workers. What are your plans to reduce social workers leaving?
Yeah, this is a really, really important question. And you're absolutely right, this keeps happening, and it's no good for people who have those social workers who keep leaving. And there's kind of two big things we're trying to do at the same time. So one is part of the reason that some social workers are always leaving is because they work for agencies. They're not full-time, or rather they're not permanent staff of the local council. They're often supplied by agencies, and that is part of the reason why it often changes for people, because these guys are on short-term contracts. So we're doing some things to stop local areas using so many people from agencies. But the other thing we're doing is just to try and encourage more people to come into the to be social workers, and to make it a more attractive place to go, because generally the people who come into social work are really, really committed, but they have very high workloads. It can be very stressful. They often have to deal with, very sort of moving and emotional stories that can take a toll on people. So we're looking at how we can support people who are social workers to make sure they want to stay in the job longer.
Thank you very much, Minister. I know there were some hands up earlier. Who should I go to next? I had a feeling you had your hand up really early on. So.
I'm the chair of Dudley's Children Care Council in the West Midlands. Being in London today with all of the care experience young people nationwide, it's been a great experience, and it's something that we'd all like to attend again. Unfortunately, due to the low budgets, not all children get the chance to represent their own town or city. My question is, how can you ensure that the local authority provide adequate funding to support children in the care councils?
No, again, I think that's a good question. I don't know exactly how care councils are funded, but this is one of those things where, given you've been able to come and do this, which is great, we're constantly talking to local authorities to try and get them to see what other councils are doing and to do that kind of thing themselves, because I don't imagine you have to do that much traveling around. You might tell me differently, but by being able to do that, it probably doesn't cost a huge amount overall. So it's something we'd obviously like other local authorities to be able to do.
Okay, we have another question from the other side of the room.
Okay.
Hey, Len. So are you going to push the government and make protected characteristics?
Are you going to push the government to make protected characteristics law?
Well, we have a number of protected characteristics already. And it is true that part of the reason that people want to be able to do that is because of the discrimination that some care leavers can face. This is one of those things, though, where there are lots of different things that people would like to make a protected characteristic at the moment. So I'm talking to you guys today, and some of you might like to see that happen. But I can tell you that there's actually, in the Equality and Human Rights Commission that looks at this, came up with a whole long list of things that it thought you could also make protected characteristics. And the problem of doing that is you can end up with too many different protected characteristics, and then you kind of defeat the purpose of having the ones that you have. So we don't have a plan to do that at the moment, but we hope that through other ways, through the different services we're providing, the different things we're funding, we can stop some of that discrimination that has been happening. And also, you know, so this week we've just launched this thing you guys might have seen, Care Leavers Wanted, which is a recruitment campaign encouraging employers to take on care leavers. So we've been doing that in government. There's now 1,000 care leavers who work in government jobs as a result of some schemes we've had recently, which is great. But the reason it's called Care Leavers Wanted is because, you know, we don't want people to just not discriminate. We actually want them to see the value and the talent and what care leavers could bring to their organizations, and actively want to hire more of them, not just not discriminate against them when they're making those decisions.
So I think the question the young person was asking was in relation to care experience and protected characteristics. Was that what your answer related to?
The first part did, yes.
Yeah.
The first part did because we have a number of protected characteristics at the moment. There's a long list of other things that people would like to make protected characteristics. We don't plan to do that at the moment. We want to try and solve the problem with other things.
I'll go on to the next question.
And later, no other group has dictated its parent.
Oh.
Which is what makes us different, which is why I think quite a lot of people feel we should be a protected characteristic. What's your opinion on that?
Yes, I think you make a good case for it. And this is a law that we created in 2010. The thing I would say to you is, or the challenge I always give to people is, you have to know what problem it is you think it would solve. So if you look at people with disabilities, for example, this is a protected characteristic. And because it's a protected characteristic, it means that some employers, for example, take certain actions. They're allowed to take certain actions. And so there is a system, two-tick system it's called, where if you have a disability and you meet a couple of criteria, you are able to be automatically interviewed for jobs. But when I talk to some employers, they tell me it's made absolutely no difference to the number of disabled people that they employ. So it's made more people get interviews. So it's protected characteristic. People could take that action. They can make sure they interview people that are underrepresented. They're doing that. It's made no difference to the number of people that are actually getting jobs. Now, why is that the case? Well, I would say the reason it's the case is because you haven't changed people's attitudes. And so people often want things in law. They want a law that will, because they think if you get the law, you get the change in behavior. But often you don't get the change in behavior because you haven't got the change in attitude. And I think it's the change in attitude that we're trying to achieve rather than the change in law.
I can see there's a hand up, which is identified as Linda, but I don't know if it's Linda. Is it you, Aria?
It's me, it's me. I have a
Okay.
question. So
Yeah,
I
go
was just
for it.
going to ask, just to add on to the discrimination and, you know, the
Yeah,
protected characteristics.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask how you would help to reduce the discrimination that young people face in educational settings. So,
Yeah.
for example, when I was at school
Yeah.
many years ago, I
Sure,
found out that there was a little star next to my name, and that let them know that I came from a disadvantaged background, and I immediately got treated differently by many teachers in my school. So I think it's a very important area that does need improvement, but obviously the steps that you're going to be taking in relation to this protected characteristics wouldn't really feed into that. So I was just wondering how you would approach it.
No, and I think, look, so two things. One is, you know, to give you another example, if you think about issues of sex and gender, again, you know, them being protected characteristics has not changed the behavior that a lot of people are experiencing. You know, it has in some cases, but you know, it hasn't in others. You could do this across a range of reasons, a range of areas. On your question, the thing that you have to try and get right is so I want a school to know if somebody has had that experience, right? I want them to know, because I want them to understand if they see, you know, certain behavior, if we've got a problem right now of some 5 and 6 year olds being permanently excluded from their school. 5 and 6 years old being permanently excluded from their school. Now, I personally cannot understand how a 5 or 6 year old should be being permanently excluded. But leaving that to one side for a minute, I want people to know about those experiences. I want them to know if they've had a parent that's died. I want them to know if they've got a particularly challenging situation going on in their home life, because I want them to make sure that the person is not, I suppose, punished for something that is really affecting their lives outside school that they have no control over. So I don't want the discrimination though. So it's finding a way where
It's
schools
one of
do
those. I
know,
think
but you know,
it's important to know that information for, you know, teachers that work closely with you, or, you know,
Yep.
you're regularly in their classes. I do
Yep.
understand that, to know what level of support to provide. But I think it's more on the fact that this star that I'm going on about is it was next to, I don't know, it could just be next to somebody with behavioural problems. So
Yep.
you get
Yep.
merged
Yep.
into a negatively looked at group without actually having the full explanation. And then say if you are a little bit have disruptive behavior, you are then picked on a lot more than other children because you have that thing. So I think it's just finding the balance between knowing what you need to know and, do you understand where I'm coming from?
I totally understand where you're coming from. And actually in another school they will get that right, you know, and you know, what we hope, and would be interesting on another occasion to talk to you guys about this, but you know, we have these virtual school heads, and you know, we hope what they are doing is helping the young people, the children and young people who are affected with these sorts of issues, and making sure that schools approach them in the right way and not in the wrong way.
Thank you. I'll hand it back over to the room.
Thank you. You can see it's an issue that young people feel very, very passionate about. So I think we've got time for 2 more questions.
Okay.
And then also I was wondering, there's lots of young people I can now see in the room with their hands up. And I was wondering, from your perspective, if they have questions for you, how they would there be an opportunity for them to direct them to you after this event?
Yeah, if you send them all in to us, then we can get you answers for those.
Thank you. I'll pass you on to the next question now.
Okay.
Hello, one of my main concerns is the lack of foster carers in the service. My question to you is, how can you ensure there will be enough foster carers in the areas most needed?
That was foster carers. How can we show there's more foster carers?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, very good question. So we are We've got a lot of campaigns on this actually, and there's a big initiative that's just launched in the northeast of the country to try and get more foster carers, because there's a bunch of people that do come forward they're interested in it, but then getting through each stage to actually be foster carers is a much smaller number of people, and it's such a fantastic commitment that these foster carers make. So we're doing a bunch of things to try and, bit like with social work, and to get more people into social workers, to get more people who will be foster carers, to get more people who will adopt as well, but also to support kinship carers. So some people are lucky enough that there's a kinship carer that will take them on, sometimes a family member, but not always. And we know that if you go with a kinship carer, with a foster carer, with somebody who's adopted you, in all three of those options, you will, on average, have a better outcome, better education, better employment outcome than you would in a care home. And so we want to encourage more three of all those things, but foster carers specifically, we do various things to try and get more recruited.
Thank you very much. Try to think of one last question.
Hiya, I lived in a children's home for 5 years, and I just want to know, what are your plans to combat the stigma around children's homes, because everyone has such bad views on them, and actually, like, even people in power, like, I've been told personally I'm going to become a murderer for being in a children's home, and I'm going to end up in prison. So I feel like we do need to combat it as a national thing.
No, I think you're right, and I think part of the reason that happens, which is true in lots of areas, is we've had some high profile cases of care homes where bad things have happened to the people in them, and of course you're absolutely right. That doesn't mean that's what's true of all places. I went to a care home very early on in this job, and it was really great, really warm, really loving. People liked it. And we had some people come in who'd lived there before and now had gone on to great things. So I think you are absolutely right. We do need people to know that it's not just, that these are not all bad situations, and that particularly the people in them are not going to turn out to have bad outcomes. But there are definitely some care homes that we've got to make better for the people who are in them.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you very much for joining us today. I can see someone's hand up, but I think we said.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, just to add on to that. How would you? I mean, if somebody was aware of like homes that have got bad things going on in them and stuff, and people have raised concerns to people higher up, and those concerns haven't been investigated or whatnot, where would people go to then report these serious homes that aren't great for children's well-being?
Well, it depends what they've already done. So because some people will take that to the local council. Some people take it to Ofsted, the school inspection people. Some people take it to something called the Care Quality Commission. I think if you feel that none of those things have given a response, then get in touch with us and we can make sure that we get the right organization to look at it.
Brilliant, thank you.